Today on the Quantum Ogre Cast, I discussed what you got wrong about West Marches and cursed items with our guest, DM Gary. Welcome, DM Gary. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for today's episode. I love both of these topics, and let's dive right in. But before we start, I'm going to change up the format just a little bit here. I usually do what I call the quantum character sheet, but are you ready for your Quantum Ogre quest?
I'm ready. Let's see what we got.
Okay, so these are some gut reaction challenges that you're going to face. So whatever just comes to your mind, first thing out, that's what we're looking for. So here we go. You, Gary, are forced to enter a dark dungeon. And oops, what's this? You touched a magic orb and your alignment shifts 1 degree. What is your new alignment?
My new alignment is chaotic good. I feel like I'm lawful good as a person, and it'd be fun to see if I was the same alignment of my wife, how my life would change.
That's the Robin Hood alignment, right? Chaotic good.
Yeah.
Your alignment shifts, but wait, you glimpse your reflection. It wasn't just your alignment. You're no longer human. What creature stares back at you?
Probably a dwarf. I've always wanted a good beard, but never can quite accomplish it. I feel like I would need one to be a truly epic DM.
Dwarf, a man after my own heart. Us dwarves have to stick together. I'm definitely, I relate, I resonate with the qualities of a dwarf, so I'm right there with you. And before you get your bearings, an ooze attacks, chasing you into a room. There's a weapon rack with only one item left. What item is it?
Oh man, I have a special spot in my heart for size. I used them a lot in my childhood, and I feel like they are underrepresented and they are not used well. It'd be fun to show this ooze how a size should be properly used.
The Raphael of weapons, right? It always bothered me in the Ninja Turtles that Raphael would never actually hit anything with his sai. He would like kick or punch, and his sai never got used. So
I think it's just because they didn't know how to use it, and then you get I see, oh, there's going to be Electra and she's going to be using size and it's going to be cool, and then she cuts people with them and it's like, no, that's not how that works at all. So
underrepresented in media, the sai. All right, so you slay the ooze with your sai, gaining 10 XP and leveling up. Time to increase one of your real life stats by 2 points. What do you increase?
It's got to be Constitution for me. I've had some sicknesses, especially here recently, and you kind of never go wrong with being hardier and living longer.
Yeah, especially this day and age. Never a bad choice. Oh no, it turns out the weapon was cursed, and now your lowest stat got even lower. Which stat just got dumped?
Sad to say, it's probably my dexterity. It would have made it hard to use the size on it, but I'm hoping those are a strength weapon in whatever system we're playing.
All right, one more. Well done, Gary. You have completed your quest and returned to the village. What is the first thing you do after arriving back in town?
I think it's going to be straight to a bath or shower or something. I've got oozes in places that oozes do not belong after taking one apart with my size.
Fair enough. Nothing like a good shower after carousing, so... Well, all right, that's your Quantum Quest. Thanks for participating in my silly little intro. And we will get right into today's first topic, which is, we'll start things off by talking about West Marches a little bit, and then we can move into maybe talking about the nuances of emergent play, because I really love both of those topics. In fact, I agree. I do love West Marches. I think it gets a bad rap because I think there are those people in certain pockets of communities that really have this, like, I don't know, like tightly defined idea of what a West Marches has to be, air quotes. Yeah, I think it's a malleable format, and it's so much more than what you see on paper or even in, a short YouTube video or something like that.
Hey partner, are you tired of stale fantasy tropes? You're looking for something a little more strange? Come, partake of my fire and allow me to read you a tale from elsewhere. I was there, working the rail yards when the barriers between realities split, when the calamity, as they now call it, arrived on our world, when the horrors, nameless and unspeakable, poured forth from its dark depths. Our home was once a beautiful and prosperous land, before the creatures came, before the clockwork. Tales from Elsewhere Clockwork is a post-apocalyptic, Weird West action horror role-playing game. A game where you play as hardy survivors, everyday folk like me attempting to survive the horrors of Elsewhere after the calamity tore apart the barrier between realities, as it does. This game uses a visceral injury system combined with called shots while keeping the math light and the violence high. Character creation is open-ended, where the players pick from over 50 backstory elements that they mix and match to create their unique survivor. You could be a preacher who was raised among the Church of Ashes, who's on the hunt for men that left him for dead. Or maybe you're a prospector from a small business, a once city slicker that got chased out of town. The combinations are endless. The game features narrative-heavy threats and monsters, with rich folklore and mysterious origins inspired by real fears and anxieties of 19th century peoples like myself. For instance, the Kentucky Sawbones is a manifestation of my fear of amputation, while the Blood Oiler evoked the dehumanization and unstoppable nature of the Industrial Revolution. The game is the brainchild of a personal friend of mine and fellow dungeon tuber, Peter, of Tales from Elsewhere, a channel where you can find insightful evidence into the philosophies behind game design, such as the one that probably went into this game right here. The Kickstarter goes live September 2nd, and buddy, that is a train you don't want to miss. But the pre-launch is happening right now. So go over there right now, click to stay informed, or else I'm going to have to skin this smoke wagon. And buddy, you don't want to see that. Sign up now, pages are live, now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
The thing with West Marches is that it brings some things to the table that I'm not going to say are impossible to bring to the table with other formats, but it's much easier to do some things in West Marches that doesn't line up with their traditional experience. One of the ones that I tell people who join my West Marches campaign is there is this sensation of when you get into something, you have to read all the material and you have to learn all this stuff and you have to write a backstory, you have to do all this crazy prep. And the answer is no, don't do that. And there's a lot of this sensation that people have when they get into a game and they look and they say, oh, this other person in the group, these other people in the group have been playing for 20 sessions. I'm never going to know what's going on. And I have to tell them, you're thinking about this as if this was a book series that you're picking up at book 6, or you're thinking about this as you're the person who's coming in late to the group project and you're underprepared and all that sort of stuff. And that's the wrong way to think about it, because what you are doing is something very valuable to this group. As a new player coming into a West Marches game, what you're doing is you're giving every other person at the table a chance to do what literally every tabletop player is burning to do in their heart of hearts. And that is to take a minute to explain all the cool stuff they did last time in D&D. That's what everyone wants to do, and nobody wants to listen to it, right? The only people that want to listen to it are the ones in the game who presumably already know what's going on. So coming in as someone who doesn't know what's going on, you're not screwing up by not knowing what's going on. You're setting up a layup opportunity for that player that had an idea of what was going on last time to be able to tell you all the cool stuff that they did. And when you come in with a new outside perspective, you can also go, well, why didn't you do blank? And then the players will look at each other and they'll think a second and they'll be like, well, we didn't think about that. And now we have to go do it. And that's beautiful. And that's an experience that it's really hard to get that experience at a traditional table where you have the same players that are coming every week.
Yeah. I know what you're saying too, because if you look at my West Marches Discord, it could be a little intimidating to go back and go through the logs and think like, oh, Yve, I have to catch up with all of this. Like they're literally session after session of notes that one of my players he's a great note taker and he enjoys getting really in character with the notes. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a chance for the other players to say like, hey, here's some things that the party has done so far. Here's what we think is important. And then you as the dungeon master are going, oh, okay. So they took that, staff from the elf lands or whatever, and they think that's way more important than I ever intentionally was going to make it. But yeah, I think there's a lot more to it than just it's an open sandbox. And I think some people come in with these sort of preconceived notions about what a West Marches style has to be, when really it's just it's D&D without the history a lot of times set in stone, right? Like you don't have to open the book, look at the primer and go, here's 6 pages of very detailed history that I'm going to have to memorize. Like, no, that's not how I'm going to do things. There's going to be a couple of bullet points that, might set the world off, or like, an overarching tension that's happening at this current time. But like, really, we're going to build while we play. It's that idea of emergent play, right?
Mm-hmm. And the system that we're playing in, and the system that I'm designing, which is supposed to be a West Marches system, right? This is something that West Marches struggles with as well, is that a lot of times you have to make certain conceits for a system to fit into that style of play, where there is this more neo-traditional or traditional style of play where you're playing as the 5-man band, and then you have to staple on this stuff, and I don't want to have teleport, or don't want to have this or that, or you have to massage whatever system you're using for West Marches. And I'm really having fun with the idea of, okay, what are the things that a West Marches actually needs and wants, and let's build the system off of that, right? Where exploration is core to the idea. Well, what does that mean? The system that we're running right now, you start with a very limited selection of classes that you can be, and the classes have to be discovered through figuring out where they are in the world and learning from the different things. Like, if you want to learn how to unlock the barbarian, well, you need to go and talk to the barbarian tribes. And it's not super unclear how to do it, but it's also not set in stone either. It's like, oh, we've seen some barbarians and we know the barbarian class exists. How do we put these pieces together? And that can kind of push them out to go and explore and go figure stuff out in a way, on a system level, that you really have to build in other things. And a lot of times, even if you're playing a traditional D&D, you might have the idea of like multi-classing, right? Multi-classing into barbarian, but the idea of, oh, I'm going to unlock barbarian and then I'm going to completely start a new character as a barbarian feels very alien to something like, if you're looking at comparing it to like Critical Role, like the idea that they would find a barbarian tribe and one of their characters, would, Sam Riegel would just say, I'm no longer a bard. I'm now a barbarian and I'm starting at level 1, and everyone else stays the same. Like that is utter madness. Whereas in this system, it's very common because you aren't playing one character, you're playing a whole cast of people. And so you have the freedom to really stretch out and explore the world in a different avenue. And I think that that's one of the big things that West Marches can do that other systems would struggle with.
Yeah, I am trying to do a West Marches Shadow Dark game. So those sort of concessions you're talking about, there are some things I've changed in order to kind of mold it better to the West Marches style. And exactly like you said, one of the first things that I did was I looked at all the extra classes and things that were in like the Cursed Scroll zines or some of the other supplements that have come out. And I made like a checklist for everyone, and I printed out. I won't go over too much of this because I did a whole video on it of like basically taking Deadlier style games or West Marches games and finding ways to adapt your game to it. One of the things I really wanted to do is, like you were saying, if someone wanted to play, like, I think there's a witch doctor in one of the Cursed Scrolls, then they would have to either go find a witch doctor in the world and sort of like befriend them, learn from them, that sort of thing. Or in this particular version of the game, every time you die, you get a chance to like add another class or race to your list of random, assorted things you can roll and obtain. But yeah, it's I think that mentality shift can be difficult if you're coming from like a Critical Role style game where it's like it's these characters all the time. They're going to live for a really long time. We're going to play these characters from level 1 to level 20. Yeah, one of the things I compared it to was like a Darkest Dungeon style game, right? Where like you go back to town, you can swap out your characters, let some of them rest, let some of them maybe like work off their sanity, that kind of thing, get some stress out, and then bring a new character that you're excited about because you've unlocked something new, and really like your town or your main camp kind of upgrades rather than thinking about it just as that specific character you were playing upgrading all the time. And it's for sure a mentality shift, but I think there's a lot of fun to be had in changing up the style of game, especially if you're someone like me who's played sort of very similar slices of different games over the years, and you end up kind of ultimately falling back into the same styles of stories and telling the same stories through character progression and things like that, even independent of different systems.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that West Marches does is it allows both players and DM to be genuinely surprised about how some things progress, right? Where I have a lot of notes, I have a lot of details about what's going on in the world, where things are, and kind of like, what's happening if the players do not intervene. If the players do not act, here is the progression of stuff that's happening. But I don't know what happens if they change stuff. And I use a lot of tables and a lot of random generation stuff. So I had an issue where one of the things that they encountered on the table was they encountered a pregnant woman who was fleeing oppression, and her husband had kind of set up a smoke bomb for her to escape ahead, and she assumed that he was dead. And they escorted her back to the base, and they set her up in a place outside of town, and they made a whole story about like, okay, well, let's go find her husband. And they made that a whole thing, and then they brought him back, and then they found a way to, and they did all this stuff that was really, really fun. And we had on another thing, like on this huge encounter table, we had this instance where, and I'll try to not get too distracted on stories about this, but we've had a couple of instances of things that, because it is all face up, right? I don't have a DM screen. Everything is in front of the players. There are some things that would be very convoluted and would seem very contrived if you didn't see the results. And one of those was the players went out. In their first random encounter check, they encountered a snake, which when you're playing as mice, that is very dangerous. They encountered this young snake, and they rolled a 6 on the table, and they did all the stuff to avoid it, and they went out and stuff, and then they stepped into like a little portion of like fairy. Basically, they had a time skip, and they didn't know that they had a time skip. They knew something weird happened, but they didn't know what was going on, and they went back to home. And their last check before they made it home, that same area, they rolled a 6. They rolled the exact same number on the encounter table, and I got to describe, yes, you encountered this specific snake again. But the first time, the snake was, it had been something that was a small snake that was just about to shed its skin. And now they saw it, and it had just recently shed its skin, and it was a little larger. But they're pretty sure, because of the markings, it's the same snake. And there was this moment at the table where they're like, "Oh my God, we've lost time!" And it hit so much harder because it didn't feel like it was something the DM was setting up, right? This is something that they knew they rolled those things. And, my players, since that has happened, they've, that has been something that people have talked about, completely apropos of nothing in the middle of other conversations many, many times. And I find that is kind of cool and unique to that style of play.
Yeah. And, I know this has been said 1,000 times on other channels, but like, the GM is a player too, and it's important to still have fun and be surprised as much as the players at your table. And if all you ever do is sort of repeat the same sorts of adventures, or even run published adventures over and over, it's going to get kind of stale after a while. And those sorts of things you're talking about, like rolling in front of your players, even you not knowing what's going to happen, can really shake up an experience and cause new ideas, really spark something in your brain that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily wrote out if you had weeks in advance to just kind of plan out a plot, so to speak. Which is another beauty of emergent play that I really enjoy personally. I try to inject a bit of randomness and chaos, especially in a West Marches game, because I don't want to fill out, like I said, like every hex ahead of time. So sometimes weird zany things get rolled, and you just have to kind of roll with the punches and figure out, like, why is this lizard folk here with a bunch of humans in this cave? Oh, well, maybe it's a cult, and they have promised all these humans eternal life if they follow the great snake, and that's what we're going with. That's what I rolled. And that ends up being an entire session, and for some reason your players latch onto those characters unexpectedly, and you're like, well, I thought they were going to go towards all these other POIs I described, but here we are. And that's going to be the session tonight.
Yeah, and that has a certain kind of charm to it. And when I tell people about West Marches, and they kind of like, well, I want to make sure that I have like my main character that I'm using, and it's like you'll have your highest level character, you'll have a character that'll feel sort of like your main character because you've been playing it longer, and it's been the one that's happened to survive until level 6 or 7, and yeah, that will be very cool. But you just have to trust me that when that character is healing on downtime, crafting, doing something else, or like off on adventure, and you're playing somebody else low level, that you're going to enjoy that, right? Because you get to experience the world in a certain level of depth. And for anyone who's played the game a little bit longer and been running games for longer, I know I ran my first D&D game October 29th, 1999. So I've been running a long time, but definitely not as long as a lot of others.
It's longer than me.
So I've been running games for quite a while, and I run a lot of games. I'm typically averaging, over the past 10 years, I probably have averaged 3 games a week as a DM.
Wow.
And for me, I just have to tell players, listen, yes, it is really fun to do high level play, but you're going to miss low level play when you're playing at high levels. And when you get back to low levels, you're going to miss high level play. And having a West Marches campaign where you have a legitimate reason to do both, it's a certain kind of staying power that is hard to properly describe until you've been playing a while. But it is genuinely satisfying.
Well, here's an interesting question for you, because I think only recently has West Marches started to emerge and like come back into vogue, so to speak. There's probably a lot of stuff that people don't realize they're missing about that style of play, particularly like you're saying, where you can hot swap characters and things like that. But I think it evokes a different style of narrative entirely, right? Because when we get sort of caught in this plots versus problems kind of thing, then it puts a lot of weight on the game master too, right? Like if you're playing a more modern style game, lots of times you feel that you have to prep this whole sprawling world, the entire history, the what's the word I'm looking for?
The lore.
The gods. Why can't I? Oh, the pantheon.
The pantheon, yeah.
You have to like craft the pantheon from scratch. You got to make this world. You have to make sure that your plot makes sense in the world and in the context of all these characters and factions. It's so many spinning plates, so many things to balance that I think it's actually such a relief to play a style of game where you just say like, hey, we're discovering a lot of this together. I think there are merits to West Marches that folks miss out on because they think, it's just this old school style of game that really isn't cool anymore or popular or like doesn't have a lot going for it other than like, we're going to do a bunch of dungeon crawls, which is not even always a factor,
Yeah, and to their point, right? I've run several West Marches games. I've played in some games. I've also played in living games that are very similar to West Marches, but there is some pretty important conceits for what a West Marches versus a living game looks like. And I've intentionally gone out looking for West Marches games and stuff that are recruiting, and I've been in a lot of bad ones. I've been in ones where the person just rolls, I've got 3d6 wolves. Why are there wolves here? Nobody cares. Roll initiative. And so like you can do that, right?
Yeah, right.
And that can be really, really disheartening. And I think people hear those stories and have those bad experiences and quite reasonably conclude, oh, that's what this is. But that's not going to be using it to its fullest, right? You don't want to take the worst version of something and treat that as indicative of the whole thing. You don't want to take, the highest quality, best version. The Knights of Last Call, for example, they have a paid Patreon for West Marches, and they have a ton of stuff that they put into that West Marches thing. They have a ton of production value because each person who's playing is paying like $15 a month to play, right? That also shouldn't be what you're comparing it to, right? You need to have something that's a good game that's somewhere in the middle to be able to really compare it to. And that is a lot to ask for some people. So I totally understand it. But at the same time, it's like, man, I just have to say to people, trust me that I think you're going to have fun with this. And, when we jump into it and when we do some of the emergent play stuff that I really enjoy doing, it's always fascinating to me to see it click, right? I can almost hear it click when someone's like, wait, we can do this? Like, someone in my system, someone rolls a heroic deed and it generates a magic item. And I ask them, hey, you did this really cool thing that is being immortalized as a magic item. What does that magic item do? And they just look at me and like, what do you mean? Where's the list? And it's like, I don't know, what would be cool? And then we just come up with something, right? And that style of emergent play being applied to everything just keeps things so fresh and keeps people, halfway behind the screen in a way that it is really hard to do in other games, right? Because if you have this plot or you're running this, you're running Curse of Strahd or whatever, you want to have certain things that are very much behind the screens because you don't want to spoil things for your players. You want them to have this thing. But if there's nothing to spoil, it doesn't matter. Like if you don't know what's going on, you can't screw it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there was a couple things there that I wanted to touch on. First, yeah, you're absolutely right. You can have a game master who just totally goes off course with things, and even in fact, the first time I attempted to run a West Marches style game, I decided to do it in DCC of all games for some reason, and it was not good, and I got really like deep in the paint with like the procedures, and I had like hex flowers for everything. It was like, oh, what's the weather going to be today? Let's roll a hex flower. And I just it got so tedious, and I focused on the wrong things about it. But so yeah, all that to say, give your GM some grace if they're new to West Marches,
And when it's run well, there is this sense of, oh, the DM didn't know, and the world feels more like its own separate thing. That's when it's going well, right? Where there is a reason why he's in here. We just haven't figured it out yet. Mm-hmm. Whereas when it's run poorly, it'll be the DM doesn't know and nobody cares, right? We're never going to know why it's in here because it was just a 7 on the table. Who cares? We're gonna roll on and do something else. And that thing can look very similar at a glance, but they're fundamentally very different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think no, you're absolutely right. It is a matter of both knowing your players, and you said it a minute ago, trust, right? It doesn't matter what kind of game I'm running, doesn't matter what the style is going to be, what the system is. If I have players that trust me, they trust what I'm going to set up for them, they know I'm here to let them have a good time and vice versa, then they're not going to be as worried when they see me roll on a table because I probably have an idea of what's going to be in store, even if it is somewhat randomized, or I inject an extra element from another random table, that sort of thing. But yeah, I think that's something that doesn't get brought up with a lot of these styles of games. Is like folks they'll go to a bar or something. Like I did this once. Went to a bar, first time ever checking out a West Marches style game. Had no idea what I was in for. Didn't know the players, didn't know the game master, did not have a good time. I didn't have any established trust for that style, that system, and honestly, the way it was run was not my favorite example I've ever seen of this. But yeah, I guess the point I'm trying to make is trust is such an important aspect of a game master to player relationship that I think that you need to know you're in good hands with any style of game, but especially a West Marches game, because there is so much that you are going to sort of build together at the table through emergent play.
Yeah, and I do want to kind of like riff off of that element of trust a moment. One of the things that I was talking about that I'm really enjoying lately is curses. I feel like curses are sort of underused in a way that's fun. But one of the important pieces is if there is a cursed item, my players need to trust me that interacting with that item is going to be fun, right? Yeah. It's not going to be a, I am useless curse, right? It's going to be a challenge to overcome, just like everything else. I mean, that's what we do as DMs. We're making challenges for you to overcome. And it has been so much fun to make interesting cursed items for my players, because once they kind of got on board with the idea of like, oh, if we can overcome this curse and we can cleanse it, we can get this powerful item, we can do all these things. And sometimes the curse maybe we want to keep it. One of the cool things that happened recently is they have this really, really cursed item, and is a belt. And someone just whipped off their belt and smacked somebody with it. And the bard whipped off their belt and smacked somebody with their belt in the middle of combat. And it ended up being incredibly effective because they were engaging with the curse and they were engaging with sort of the elements with it. And I feel like it's such an underused element, but it does really have that big piece of trust that you need to be
Absolutely.
able to make it fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You heard it here, folks. You're doing curses wrong. That's the problem. See, I think it stems back to this time of like really adversarial play that people are afraid that, oh, I got a cursed item. But like honestly, some of the most fun and memorable moments and shenanigans that I've had in any of my games, you can ask my players, are weird or cursed items. And you know, along with that, you think about like let's just use Critical Role as an example. I can't remember the exact moments or anything, but like I think Travis's character Grog gets like a cursed sword,
Mhm.
and that's like I'm pretty sure some of everyone's favorite moments in that season of the show.
Yeah.
And it can be done well, but you do need a level of trust that like your GM isn't just giving you this thing to punish you. They're giving it to you to either create more interesting, you know, more interesting challenges, like you're saying, within the story, or because like maybe it is actually a really powerful item, and this is the counterweight to its power, right? Like you don't want to be the guy who's just blowing up every room full of goblins with one move every time you use an ability. There needs to be a cost, that sort of thing. It makes for more interesting storytelling. So curses are fun.
Yeah. And I sent you one of the cursed items. It's got a bunch of nonsense on it because it's a high level item in a game that you're not familiar with.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I want to say with this and kind of describe to the listeners is like an example, right? When I talk about a cursed item that's fun, there is this really cool greatsword and it has all these cool abilities. You can do all this cool stuff with it. And one of the notes on it, the curse, they don't know what the curse is until it activates for the first time. And the curse on this item causes it to disappear from its owner's hand and decapitate the first enemy who is slain or the first creature who makes a mortality check. So in other games, a death saving throw. Uh, and then the attack is made as an automatic critical success. So it will crit the first person to drop to 0. And if your players are playing and that first person who goes down is a goblin and the fighter's weapon vanishes from their hand and decapitates the goblin that just died, everyone's like, okay. And the idea of going to 0 hit points around that fighter with that really awesome weapon has now radically changed. Everyone's
Yeah.
opinion of I have been hurt is now very different if they're looking at me like, well, how far away does that teleport work? How do we set this up? Can we make sure we all focus fire down whatever the weakest enemy is to get that to trigger so that does it once at the start of the fight and then we don't have to worry about it? You get this idea where a good curse makes the player want to wield it because it is cool and fun and interesting, but also it changes the way the players approach combat or they approach a situation, they approach whatever's going on because they have a different tool to use that isn't just I hit the button and I win. It's a thinking problem, right? We have to figure out a way to overcome this situation to take advantage of what we have.
Yeah, I love that. That's so fun and flavorful, and also like, yeah, I love when there's kind of a monkey's paw to magic or magic items, and it's like, yeah, it is good, but it can go bad sometimes in the wrong situation or something. Reminds me
Mhm.
of like I've been reading a lot of Dungeon Crawler Carl, and there's stuff in that world where every time it's on the page kind of a thing, you're like, oh boy, what's gonna happen now? But, yeah, there's, oh, you said something that really an element of mystery in an item can be so much fun for your player to explore too, because, like, I rarely take an item description like this anymore and just hand the full thing to the player. In fact, a lot of times I'll say, "Here's what you know about the item, and there are some things that you'll have to discover as you use it."
Mhm.
Especially, if I had a sentient sword with this much text on it or something. And that's one of my favorite things in any sort of media is like sentient weapons. There's so much fun to be had to either, egg the party on or, just for laughs at times and stuff like that. But I like having an element of mystery to magic, or especially artifacts, magic items, relics, and things. It can really fuel an interesting beeline story or, side story kind of a thing.
Well, I know we talked about a couple of different things that we could discuss, but let me throw you a bit of a curveball here
Sure.
off of that idea of liking items. If I talk about concordance, do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Concordance and items?
No.
So in D&D 4th edition, I think in general, the way that they handle items is something that I do not enjoy. There is a thing where, a lot of times you kind of have a build, and if you've got a +1 frost weapon that turns all of your stuff into cold damage, and you picked up a feat for cold damage, and you've got a helm that helps you with cold damage, and you kind of build yourself around being cold. If you find a really cool +2 fire sword, you don't want it because you've sort of set yourself into place of wanting a cold sword. You just want the +2 cold sword version, which is a different mentality, right? It's all these little pieces that you're adding together into this whole, and it takes away this sort of specialness of magic items from a lot of games. But one of the things that the system does very well is the idea of what an artifact item is. And so in D&D 4th edition, when you get an artifact, it will have a set amount of concordance. So let's say you pick it up, it's got concordance 4. And at concordance 4, it'll have a certain set of abilities. Maybe it'll be a +2 sword that shines brightly, is very cool. And then it'll say on the sword, this is what the sword cares about. The sword wants you to be stronger. It, loves the summer fae. It hates the winter court. It wants to stab outsiders in the face. And it'll give you a list, and it says, when you do these things, you get upper, plus or minus concordance. So
Cool.
let's
So it's
say
kind of like tiers, and you're unlocking abilities for it.
exactly. So let's say
That's cool.
you kill a person of the winter court and you level up. So you gained 3 concordance. You're now at 8 concordance. Well, 8 concordance is now the next tier. So it's not a normal thing. It's now the weapon is satisfied. And when it's satisfied, you get this new property. You get this new ability. You might get a new quest for your weapon. It might now be a +3 weapon. And now it's a weapon of summer. So it gains the weapon of summer abilities. And it is this thing that takes this idea of growth with a character and puts it onto a weapon in a way that I think could be brought to a lot of other systems. I've used it in several other systems to great effect. And if that sort of idea of like mystery and kind of what's going on with something and kind of building this thing out would be fun for you, take a look at some of the things like, the Amulet of Passage from 4th edition, which is a concordance item. There's a whole bunch of them. But it's one of those things that, if you're with this item and you have this item for 20 levels, you're going to have like a full page of abilities for one
Right.
item, which might seem insane, but you're only getting, one ability every few levels. So like
Yeah.
you're never overwhelmed by it. You're just getting these little pieces one at a time.
That's so cool. I everything I hear about 4th edition makes my like design brain think like, man, I probably would really actually enjoy 4th edition. But man, that would fit so well and slot so well into like, a game like Knave or Cairn, where maybe you have less abilities innately through your character,
Mhm.
and it really would allow, let's say you're creating a custom item for that player and that character. It really gives you a lot of leeway to have some involvement in the path of their character, but in a positive way, not like a taking away agency from that player or anything like that, but like let you have some input in like the growth of that character, and say like, maybe they're playing a barbarian and their barbarian just doesn't particularly do well in fights where there's difficult terrain or something. So the next time their concordance raises with that weapon, you say, well, now you can do this little dash where you have spectral wings or something, and you can go over all the terrain and get straight to the bag. Stuff like that. You can gift your players boons through the vehicle of that magic item. So I think that's super cool. I think there's a lot of malleability to an idea like that, especially in a game where you already have less abilities, you know.
I agree as well. Are you familiar with Trespasser?
I'm not.
So Trespasser is a game that is more or less designed by a single human being. And if there is a thing of, oh, I'd kind of be interested in how fourth edition D&D design like mentality functions, but I also kind of like the knave old school style play stuff. You might want to give it a try. It is interesting even just as a read. It's one of those things that's on, itch that you can throw the creator like, $5-10 or $20 if you feel like it's worth it. And look at a system that's trying to iterate on some of the cool things that fourth edition did. Although I will say that there's a lot of things they did well and a lot of things they did poorly in 4E. But one of the things that for me ended up making fifth edition hard to play as my only game, which fourth edition for me was not hard to play as my only game, was the level of, I'm going to put this in front of my players. I know how strong this is. I know how strong this challenge of giving my players is, and be able to really feel comfortable, right? Where if I want to change something, I can, but I know what my toggles are. There's a thing, Mike Shea, Sly First, he put out this single page explanation. He just reformatted a lot of the rules from the Monster Manual 3, and he put down a single page. Hey, here is all the math for fourth edition on one piece of paper. You can run a campaign from level 1 to level 30 and just have that one sheet of paper.
That's such a classic Mike Shea move.
And it's so cool. It's so useful. And I've now, when I play other games, and I played Shadow Dark, I made the cheat sheet just like the one in like the one from fourth edition. I made one for 5e.
Oh, that's cool.
And my straw that broke the camel's back for 5e was I did a lot of convention play, and I wrote some modules and stuff for convention play. But there was an adventure for 5th edition that was designed to be a collection of 5 1-hour adventures, and they were designed to be played supposedly in any order. And it was supposed to be, this is at a convention, you've never played D&D before, here's a pre-generated character, here's a 1-hour little contained adventure. You can play through, you've got 3 hours, you can play through 3 of the little adventures. And the thing that frustrated me a lot is that this was presented, right, as this very new player friendly, this very new DM friendly, right? Because it should just give you just what you need to go forward. But I think the third adventure in the series, which again could be the first one that the players have access to, involves, and the adventure is called Harried in Hillsfar. It involves an encounter with 3 jackalwares. Now, I don't know if you know what a jackalware does in 5th edition. It's a CR 1/2, but it's a shapeshifter. So this CR 1/2 is immune from non-magic weapons. And it can kind of only be hurt by silver or by magic. And in addition to that, this CR 1/2 monster has an at-will sleep gaze. That's like a DC like 12 or 14 saving throw, right?
Oh boy.
And he has pack tactics and is a shapeshifter that is shapeshifted into a villager posing as the quest giver. Now,
it's such a recipe for disaster.
Is there a way to run this adventure where that doesn't immediately TPK your group? Yes, of course there is.
Yeah, if you're a smart GM and you have some experience, but
if the players don't know that this is, hey, we have to be creative, we can't just hit them and fight them with hit point stuff. Like maybe we might have a group that plays, hey, we have the cleric and 2 rogues and a fighter. We don't have any silver items because we're level 1, and we don't have any magic. So they're literally immune to everything we do. We have to get creative. And having that be something that is required, and the module then says, oh, there's a fairy dragon that'll help them and that sort of stuff. But that also feels terrible as a new play to go, oh, we're useless, and some thing in the darkness just came out and Deus Ex saved us. And that was one of the things that I was like, oh yeah, this CR 1/2 monster that is immune from level 1s. I'm having a problem with this on a system level. This shouldn't be in here.
Yeah, because it's one thing to say like, hey, you can, clever your way out of this situation. It's an entirely different thing to say, mechanically, you are screwed. There's just nothing on paper that you can do. You have to evacuate. You have to get out of there if your GM allows. And that's the other thing. Like because it's con play, they might just be trying to push through the adventure, and whatever the fight gets forced, and that's it. TPK.
Yeah, and the other piece of that is this really matching the game style that we want to play, right? None of the
Exactly.
other adventures had that requirement for being creative. They were pretty straightforward. We're gonna go be big damn heroes. We're level 1, but we've got some cool stuff. We've got our one spell and our fighter with a sword, and we're gonna get the job done. And this adventure says if you do that and the DM doesn't do something, you're just gonna die. And the idea is not that you just immediately have another character that you plop onto the map and keep playing. Character death is, hey, we're done for the session. Maybe we'll re-roll next time, or we'll do something different. And that is not typically the type of game that 5th edition is when it's kind of put forward, like their published adventures and modules and things. Don't really say that that's what we're playing. And not all the system is designed to do that. And so, it's a very generic tool that tries to do very specific things, but it's got so much stuff mixed in there that it can be full of all these pitfalls for DMs, and it can lead to one of those really bad experiences.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I've been to those cons, and it's not a fun situation when your game master is looking at the adventure they're running and scratching their head, going, "Well, I don't know, guys. This is what was written. Sorry." You
You're
know?
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's in a way not entirely their fault. Like a good game master might have read that situation ahead of time and went, "Oh yeah, no one's going to have silver swords yet," and like let me think of a way out. But yeah, if you're just playing it as written kind of a thing, then oof, yeah, I feel bad for the those players. But well, before we get caught into another conversation here, Gary, I just want to say it's been awesome having you here on the show. We could probably have an entire episode about 4th edition because I am very intrigued by it as someone who kind of missed the boat on 4th edition. And well, maybe we'll have to save that for another time.
Yeah, I'm game for it as well. And I know with my game coming out a little bit later, if it ends up being something that our schedules work, and I can do the 4E game at some point, or the 4E podcast, if that's something you want to do, I'd be 100% on board for it.
Well, cool. Yeah, and I don't know what state your game's at right now, but if you want to sort of pitch it, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I mean, the game we've been working on it for 3 years. So the pitch is the game is called Dice Mice. You are playing as a noble family of mice. Think you're playing Game of Thrones, but everyone is mice, and the all the games of houses, they're all against the outsiders, right? You're Westeros as it should be, where only the outside is the problem. And you get to create your own image. You have your house words, and your house words is what generates your power, what generates your magic items that you create when you're out and playing and doing stuff. And it is this very strong emergent style play where you go out into the wide world. And if you are able to zoom back far enough outside of the game, you'll realize that the entire campaign setting, the entire game takes place in the median of an interstate, with the north and southbound lanes being the edges of the campaign area. And so there is this really fun juxtaposition of real world stuff with this sort of high fantasy, but very, very low stature.
Cool. That sounds awesome. As someone who's both a fan of like games like Mouse Ritter and Game of Thrones, that seems like a perfect blend to me personally. So, and it was called Dice Mice, correct?
Dice Mice. Yep.
Awesome. Well, check out Dice Mice. It may not be out at the time that this episode airs, but keep an eye out for it. And go check out DM Gary, which by the time this episode airs, there might actually be a Dice Mice channel. So
yeah, we'll see. I'm hoping.
If so, I'll have links down in the doobly-doo, for lack of a better word, below. But thank you so much for being here. It's been awesome talking to you. I could talk about West Marches and apparently 4E forever. But thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time in the dungeon, no matter what choices you make. Running through a dungeon, you come across a junction. You
gotta go left or right. It doesn't matter what you choose, 'cause either way you lose. There's a quantum ogre just out of sight. And now it's coming to a head, the very thing you dread. You get ready for the coming fight. Your spells are waning fast, you hit them with your blast. It's the last flickering light. Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast, Quantum Ogre Cast.